Welcome back, guys, to YouTube. Week 2 of Atypical. We're still talking about families and the important parts of being a not perfect family or in a not perfect family. So let's get right into it. We'll start again with a question, and it's this. Do you remember a time when something didn't go right because of a decision you made? I remembered a convo I had with my parents after a late night during my senior year. I thought it was no problem being out late because I had permission. But I got home incredibly late. The issue that came up was neither of us, me, my parents, or I, were specific enough with what we wanted or the expectations. And so it turns out my parents weren't happy. That conversation that I had with them was incredibly tough. And oftentimes we try and avoid hard conversations when that's exactly what God says an atypical family needs. So families aren't perfect. We're just going to state it right now. Families aren't perfect, but they have to have tough conversations. So let's look at another family this week. Straight out of the Bible, Jacob and Esau. Jacob, the younger brother of Esau, wanted what his older brother had. So, with his mother's help, he came up with a plan to trick what was seemingly his dying dad, and steal his brother's birthright, his brother's inheritance, physical and emotional and spiritual inheritance. Not a very loving thing to do, right? Not a very normal family thing to do, right? Definitely imperfect. After being successful, Jacob had to run for his life because his brother was so angry with him that he thought he was going to kill him. Sometimes we make mistakes or hurt someone, and we need to have a tough conversation about forgiveness. P.S. We'll talk about that next week. And making things right. Sometimes someone else hurts us. Isn't that true? And or offends us, and we have to have a tough conversation with them to hopefully restore that relationship. So what happened with Jacob and Esau? So years have passed, and both brothers have moved on with their lives. They've gotten married, they've had kids, and believe it or not, both of them are incredibly successful businessmen. They're well respected, they have tons of people working for them, and they essentially have kind of become their own little communities. And so truthfully, Esau thought for years Jacob was dead because he had heard nothing from him or about him. There was no hint of anybody seeing him off in the distance one day. And so he just assumed after years and years and years, we're probably looking at near a decade of never hearing anything, that he was gone. But one day, that all changed. He got news from someone who worked for him that Jacob was alive and was heading his way. Can you imagine being Esau? And all those old feelings maybe coming back up at what your younger brother had done to you all those years ago? Or how about Jacob and the fear of what could happen with all that built up anger maybe that was still in he thinks that maybe he's still inside his brother. We read about some of what happens in Genesis 33 verses 1 through 4. And we're going to read that right now. Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. Whew. So he divided the children among Leah, his first wife, Rachel, his second wife, and 2 female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and her son, Joseph, in the rear. He himself went out ahead of them and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, which was a cultural tradition to do when you want to show favor and affection, and they wept. What do you do when you face a tough conversation? Jacob had a hard time meeting that conversation head on, so he did some different things. Jacob was trying to keep the peace with gifts. Some of those gifts actually are in the chapter before that he sends out ahead of them. And then he is displaying all his children and his family, trying to hopefully stoke a piece of compassion inside his brother. And lastly, he calls himself Esau's servant multiple times and bows down to the ground to say, I'm below you, I'm beneath you, I'll do whatever you want. People respond, right, in some interesting ways when a relationship confronts them with an issue. And things like pretend like nothing's happened. Brush it off like it wasn't a big deal. Be nice. That's kind of one of Jacob's approaches. Give gifts, another one that Jacob was doing. Or avoid the other person, which Jacob did for years. God is saying people in my family have tough conversations. And if that's true, which it is, that there's really three things I wanted to share with you really quick. Keys to tough conversations. Three things that have to be a part of every tough conversation. And that first one is understanding. It's a lot like these headphones. We put them on to listen to some music, to lock in onto something we want to listen to. And understanding's a lot the same way. It requires us to listen and lock in on the other person across from us, to understand who they are, what's the issue, how they feel, what they're thinking. And sometimes that's hard to do, but understanding is key. Number two, honesty, truth-telling. I think it kind of speaks for itself. You have to say what the problem is. You can't dance around it. You can't pretend or assume that the other person knows. There's something about saying that out loud that just changes the conversation. Number three, action steps or a plan for change. Because something's gone wrong, and you want to be able to be healthy and not be in the same place again. So Esau eventually pushed Jacob to have the tough conversation and DTR it. If you read the rest of the story, you'll see it took time, but things got better. And then you read in Genesis 36 that Jacob and Esau have another tough conversation. But this wasn't about mending old hurts and wounds, but this was about one of them having to finally move away and have a change in their life. This not so perfect family, an atypical family, had learned to have tough conversations. So here we go. As we wrap this up, a question and a thought. As a member of your family and your church family, are you willing to have tough conversations? Are you? When relationships get hard, and they will get hard, I want you to remember this, that not normal families still have tough conversations. That's it. So process that, think about it, come with some questions, ask them in your life group, and see where you end up. We'll see you next time.